Hi, I'm Jacqueline Lara, host of Radical Acts Uncut. I'm a creative, an entrepreneur, and CEO of Impact PR. Today, I'm speaking with Tracey Michelle Lewis-Giggets. She's author of the NAACP Image Award winner Black Joy and host of podcast Heart Talk with Tracey Michelle. You might have seen her talking about Black Joy on Good Morning America, and her new book, Black Joy Playbook, 30 Days of Intentionally Reclaiming Your Delight, is out now. Congratulations, Tracey. I first had the pleasure of meeting you in 2017 at a writing retreat, a thread at Yale. We were in the same cohort. It was my first writing retreat, so things really went from 0 to 100 real quick for me. But it was a joy to meet you and, share space with you. And I am so glad to have you here today.
Likewise, and thank you so much for having me. It was a joy to meet you then, and it's a joy to connect with you now. So thank you.
Excellent. Well, let's get into it. Can you begin by telling me your origin story just with Black Joy and how your recent book came to be?
Sure. Interestingly enough, my journey into joy started with grief. I lost a family member to racial gun violence in 2018, and everything just kind of snowballed from there. I was doing a lot of work, a lot of social justice work on the campus where I was teaching, diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And we were getting quite a bit of pushback from obviously some folks on campus, but also just in general about the work we were doing. And it took a toll on my body. I, for the last 6 months of 2019, was basically bedbound for the most part. Couldn't locate what was going on, went to a bunch of doctors. And it just so happened that I'd been in therapy for a while, and my therapist asked me a very pointed question. She said, "Tracey, what does joy feel like?" I couldn't answer. She's like, "What does it feel like in your body? Can you give me a description?" And the thing is that if she had asked me what rage felt like, I could locate it quickly. If she had asked me what sorrow and grief felt like, I could tell her pretty clearly, but I couldn't locate joy. And so I began this journey of figuring out what joy felt like for me and what it meant for me, and specifically what it meant for me as a Black woman in this country, and how I wielded my joy in particular ways because of that fact. And so from that, of course, as writers do, I started writing about it. I wrote an article for the Washington Post about Black joy as resistance, and everything sort of took off from there. This book, Black Joy Playbook, was more born out of the fact that after the first book came out, Black Joy, Stories of Resistance, Resilience, and Restoration, I mean, people was like, "Okay, great. You told us your story." We got these essays and they're beautiful or whatever, but how do I locate joy? How can I be intentional about giving myself permission to know joy? And I was like, okay. So I created this 30-day practice, with questions and reflections and all those kinds of things to help folks kind of navigate that for themselves.
Excellent. And you mentioned that it's so important to pursue joy in the midst of grief. Can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I think, this idea that we have to find joy, right? Like, I think what so many folks don't realize is that we don't have to go outside of ourselves to find joy, right? We can have happy moments. And I talk about in my first book, the difference between joy and happiness, but we can go out and have these sort of temporary moments of happiness, but joy is something that already exists inside of us, right? It's a stabilizing, and especially for Black and Brown folks, we've had to know joy in the midst of sometimes great trauma, right? And if I think about my ancestors, thinking about, them having to be able to sing a song in the midst of being on a plantation, or having to find ways to express joy through the creativity and innovation that our people are known for, even in the midst of dehumanization, right? So The thing is that joy exists already. It's our birthright. And the reality is it's always going to exist with grief. It's going to exist with rage. And I think what we have to do is give ourselves permission to experience the fullness of our humanity and the depth and breadth of our emotions, right? So I can go and have a good time dancing with my daughter, having a Gen X, Gen Z battle in the backyard, and at the same time come in and cry my eyes out, or, you know, express my anger and rage at what's going on in the world. I can do all of those things simultaneously, and it's okay. And it's okay part that people sometimes struggle with. Like, is it okay for me to experience this joy? Really, as a people, we've been doing this all along. So
Exactly. Yeah. And I think even when you think about the Black church, you have folks like Juanita Bynum who say, it's in times of when you're in when you're in the challenge, that's exactly why you need to praise your way out, right? When you're in the
absolutely,
midst of struggle.
absolutely. And here's the thing, when I say our ancestors already knew how to do this, it's just that nowadays we have language for it. But the truth of the matter is, when my great grandmother would go to, service, and she'd sit on that pew and she'd rock herself and she'd move herself. Now, we know that in scholarly realms as bilateral stimulation, that rocking movements that rocking movement symbolizes what often happens in the womb. It's a comforting action, right? It's an action that stabilizes our central nervous system. But she didn't know all of that, right? she didn't have that language, but she understood that the call and response, the vocalization of her praise, the rocking back and forth, the dancing, the shouting, these were all things that made her feel better, that made her, it was a healing that happened in the midst of that. And so she knew how to touch and access joy even when she had to go, you know, to work for someone on Monday that would treat her poorly. So, yeah, absolutely. I think the Black churches, and there's so many. I mean, our creativity and innovation across musical genres, all of that is born from the ability to hold these things in tension together, joy and pain, joy and trauma, all of that.
Right. And when you think back to your childhood or earlier times, is there an event or an experience that you believe just kind of contributed to your inner resolve?
That's a very good question. I'm not sure if it was an event in my childhood that, because I was a little worrywart, I think because of some of my childhood traumatic experiences, being a survivor of sexual assault and abuse, I think I carried a lot of anxiety, right? But I will say this, I will say that as a teenager, there was a resilient quality to me. I was a push through a push through person. I was a person that was able to compartmentalize what I might have been feeling in order to get a thing done, whatever the thing happened to be. And so I think that was something that I created for myself. We could call it a trauma response, I guess, but it was something that I created for myself in order to survive. And so what I had to learn, like, that's a very good thing. I think sometimes we talk about survival as bad, but I think the reality is that as human beings, we create these mechanisms to survive. And that was one of mine. I think what I had to do as I got older was tweak that. While that was the thing that I did to survive, that will not be the thing that I need to do to thrive. Right.
Right.
And so I had to, and that's where joy, the conversation of joy comes in, right? Because then I was like, okay, how do I be resilient, but not allow myself to be run down? How do I be resilient, but access joy so I can balance or find harmony in it all? So I don't know if it's a specific event in my childhood, but I can say that there was a point in my childhood where I chose to be that maybe generalized or stereotypical strong in order to survive and move through my life.
Yeah, definitely. And on this show, we unpack tests. And unfortunately or fortunately, however you look at it, parenting doesn't come with a manual. So, can you tell me what is testing you with parenthood right now and how it connects to your work?
Mm, listen, I am a mom, a mother of a newly minted teenager. Exactly. I
I've
see your
got,
face.
yes.
So my daughter just turned 13 and it just something has shifted. And so there's a new way of relating to each other. I think what I'm finding challenging right now is I am required in this season of our relationship to come face to face with my own inner child. I am required to almost, and I know this is maybe like a little bit of a buzzword, but reparenting myself, even as I'm trying to parent her. I love my mother, I love my father, were the things that they didn't know and didn't have access to. And my mom says all the time, like, you have the internet, you have all of this information, things I just didn't know being a 20-year-old mom in the 70s, right? And so I'm trying to parent my child differently, but I still have a lot of the old ways in me. And so that dynamic is creating conflict, not between me and her per se, but inside of me as I'm trying to navigate how I want to parent her. And she's doing all the things that 13-year-olds do. She's pushing the boundaries. She's establishing independence. She's, deciding, for herself how she wants to be in the world and how she wants to wear her clothes. And when mommy says, we're not wearing that, it's fall, it's cold, so maybe the short shorts are not going to work. And, those dynamics, I have to remind myself that she is developmentally where she is supposed to be. And I have to kind of overcome, I think sometimes our parents, right, before would wield power, right? The power dynamic. And so we tended to obey out of fear, right? And out of this idea that, I don't want to get in trouble and want to do it a little differently, but also let her know that there are boundaries and that there's respect and all those kinds of things that she has to know and implement. So it's been a challenge in the sense that the relationship has shifted. It's not my baby anymore. And yet there are times when she wants to be a baby and time when she wants to be an adult, and she's confused and I'm confused. And we're doing this dance of learning each other again. And it can be a very beautiful thing, but it can also, as I said, be a very challenging thing for someone who is still reckoning with her own childhood and her own self, right? So I know this is a little long-winded, but I think in terms of how it connects to my work is that she's watching me, right? And she's learning about how to hold joy and pain and joy and discomfort. I think that's the biggest thing conversations we've been having right now is around how do we sit in discomfort, right? Like you don't like this thing that happened. You don't like what your friend said to you. And so your reaction will be determined by how well you can sit in it for a minute and not react, I want to go off on her or I want to slam my door or whatever it is. Right. And so but here's the thing, she's watching how I handle
Exactly.
discomfort. She's watching how I hold joy, how I implementing joy. She's watching me take my deep breaths, right? And before I speak to her father, about, something that him and I might be disagreeing on, right? Like she's watching that. And I think, first of all, if anybody has followed my daughter online or, our relationship online, they know that she is a free spirit. She is Black girl freedom all day long, and sometimes that's scary for me because I'm like, wait, do you know what they think about Black girls? I don't say this, right? But
Right.
I have that in the back of my mind as like, oh no, you can't be that free. But oh no, I have raised her to be free, right? And so we are again in this dynamic of her learning joy, learning, how to sit in discomfort for me, and me learning how to be free through her. And there's this back and forth conversation that's not an actual conversation, but just this learning that's happening.
Yeah, and what I'm hearing is that again, it's requiring each of you guys to shift with each other and of course reflecting back to, again, like you said, your own, the way you were parented, and it's having to do all of these things at once.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So also, can you just speak a little bit, you were talking about stillness, and
Mhm.
sometimes joy requires you to be still. Can you talk
Yeah.
about that
Yeah.
some?
I actually always believed that joy was sort of this expressive, loud thing, right? Whether it's you're on a roller coaster ride and you're so excited and you, hey, or, this beautiful, wonderful thing has happened and it's made you happy. And so you express that. I've always believed that that was joy. And I think culturally, Black joy is often expressed culturally by the animation, right? The animation of our joy, whether it's through dance and song and all those kinds of things. And it wasn't until when I got sick and I was forced, my body forced me to be still, that I realized that joy was an undercurrent, right? So that it could exist, yes, in the loud, in the expressive, in the animation, but it oftentimes is a grounding force. It's a healing force. It is something that kind of lies under the surface that stabilizes you when you might be in the midst of grief and rage and pain or whatever. And so I got really still. I began to look at the contemplative practices, meditation, mindfulness, those practices, and realized that I felt the most joy when I could be still. And that I'm actually spending quite a bit of time on my podcast this season talking about what it means to be a Black contemplative. What does it mean to come from a tradition that's about action and activism, to come from a tradition that's about vocalizing and animation and cultural expression and all those beautiful, wonderful, necessary things, but to also have embraced this notion of quiet and solitude and stillness as a way to ground myself while I'm also doing that other work, right? And so stillness has been a huge part of how I know joy. And often what I recommend to folks, because 9 times out of 10, they're coming out, I don't know how to give myself permission to experience joy. I don't know how to, grant that. I feel guilty when I'm doing stuff that I love. All of that, I'm saying, well, have you actually gotten still enough? Because we're going, 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 and we're in a culture of constant productivity, and things are getting faster and faster and faster, and we're taking in so much information that at what point are we able to quiet the noise to even be able to know what joy feels like? My therapist, when she asked me what does joy feel like in my body, it's a funny story. When I couldn't answer her, I began again to like figure out and pay attention to when I felt joy and what that felt like. And so I found joy by watching an episode of This Is Us. you know, because I'm a writer, right? I'm a storyteller. And I feel like it was some of the best storytelling on television at the time. And so I'm sitting there and I'm watching it and I'm like so excited. I have this look on my face of like, wow, like, and I remember my husband walking into the room and he like backs out like Homer Simpson in that meme because he's like, I don't know what's going on here, but you look like you need to be alone because I was just so happy. And in that moment, I think, I had begun to be a little bit more self-aware, aware of my body. And I said, oh, wait a minute. Like I had this warmth in my chest. There's like a little bit of excitement. And I'm like, oh, this is what joy feels like. Right. And again, it wasn't a loud thing. I wasn't, listening to music or anything like that. I was just watching a television show. And inside of me, I felt so at peace, right? Like, and calm and joyful in a way that I didn't really recognize as joy beforehand. And so I do think that can access joy in the quiet sometimes. Sometimes it's the only way we're going to get to it.
Yeah. And sometimes you need to be present. It's like when you're present, you can actually feel it.
Absolutely. Presence is important. And I'm one that has been known to be on the grind, and constantly moving. And I still to this day have to remind myself, hey, get still, get present, as you say. Absolutely.
Yes. And if you were given like a do-over, would you make your test disappear?
Mm. No, because, my primary test right now being with parenting my daughter, I certainly would not make the overall test of it disappear. Now, there's some things that I would like to not happen. For
Right.
sure. I think that's real. And I think, if anybody says like, oh no, I would go through exactly the way I don't know how true that is, but I do know that it's kind of like that notion, as a writer, you might understand this, like, the saying that I hate writing, but I love to have written. I forgot who is attributed to. Like this idea of moving through a thing, right? And processing it. And in the midst of it, there are parts of things that you just cannot stand and don't like. But the journey itself, you wouldn't trade for the world. And I think that's where I am with parenting. Like, I love my daughter, and I can see where those shifts and that dynamic between us is making her better and making me better. And so while it is a test daily, and I am tested daily, um, I think that the journey, the outcome, this is the one time when I say we can be outcome focused, because I often say, don't focus on the outcome, just focus on the steps. But I think in order to be able to see that and not get mired in the pain and mired in the problem or the challenge, I think sometimes it is okay to kind of look ahead and say, the the outcome of this work will be my child will be courageous and free and can speak for herself, but have also boundaries and set boundaries for herself. Like I can say that the work that we're doing now, even when it's hard, will have an outcome that we all will be celebrating in hopefully a few years. But the day to day is hard, and you ask me tomorrow, I might have a different answer.
Yes, but we keep doing it, we keep doing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So amazing. Well, thank you for listening to Radical Acts Uncut. We also have the Radical Report, which is our crowdsourced segment. So a single leap of faith can change your life, and you never know how your courage can inspire someone else. Write me a 60 to 90-second note that I can read to listeners about your most recent or memorable radical act and why it was worth it. You can remain anonymous if you want to. This can be anything, whether you've switched your political party, asked for a raise, finally took that solo trip, whatever it is, just send it to me and we'd love to share it with listeners. And we actually received our first radical report. Aaron Neal writes, we moved to Montreal 10 years ago, sight unseen, from Los Angeles when my husband was offered a new job. 30 days after accepting the offer, we were on a plane to Canada with everything we could carry, including our 14-month-old son and our blind diabetic dog. Everything stayed behind in our storage for the next 7 years. Looking back, we hoped we'd find a better quality of life and greater work-life harmony. As we approach the 10-year mark in Montreal, I'm happy to say we found what we're looking for and more. My husband secured his first film directorial role. We welcomed our daughter in 2016. Both my kids are bilingual in English and French, and we recently bought our first home, which has enabled my husband and I to start every day with a 10-kilometer ride before work. Now I'm starting a new journey as a newspaper columnist covering the intersections of work, family, and culture, and it was a radical act that resulted in wonderful life experiences. Thanks for that radical report. And Now, thank you again to Tracey for joining me today. It's been wonderful hearing all about Black Joy, and I would love for you to tell listeners how they can buy your new book.
Absolutely. First of all, let me just say thank you so much for this podcast. Thank you for what you're doing. I am speaking not just prosperity, but like all kinds of wonderful things into this work that you're doing because we need more. We need more of these stories out in the world. So thank you so much. Folks can reach me at tracymlewis.com, TMLG Writer on Instagram, and they can purchase the book wherever books are sold, whatever bookstore. I prefer indie bookstores, support our indie bookstores, but also Amazon, Books a Million, and all of that. So it's Black Joy Playbook.
Okay, and then could you also share some information about season 4, again, of Heart Talk with Tracey Michelle?
Absolutely. I'm excited. Season 4 of Heart Talk with Tracey Michelle. Every year we do a different theme for the season. Last year was Black Joy, obviously. This year it's Black and Contemplative. And as I'd mentioned, we are going to be talking about does it mean to embrace quiet and stillness, even as you are part of a tradition of activism and action and innovation and cultural expression that's often loud and big. And so how do we balance that? How do I personally balance that? I think we're going to have some amazing guests. So I'm looking forward to that.
Great. I look forward to tuning in as well. And please subscribe to Radical Acts Uncut wherever you stream your audio, and follow the show on Instagram at Radical Acts Uncut. Remember to embrace the beauty and the mess.